the idea of the actual Bardo space and the interval, the idea of intercepting the opponent. And the opponent is also our own fictions or complexes. You get it in the gap where it's not strong. So it can't relate to anything. That's how it works. If you can literally intercept these things so they are caught, exactly as the man lion, the ferriomorph is both a deity and an animal. At that crossing point, it's neither inside nor outside, neither day nor you've got it, and you can operate. You are the master of the Bardo times and spaces. Then you can destroy it. You can kill it there and then. That's an active way of dealing with these things. So it's a representational cultural system for doing that. That's very, very well grooved.
Yeah, it feels, whenever you talk about it, it feels much more like depth psychology than certainly what the Jungians do. The thing that always stuck with me is when you said that there was a guy who you were training or working with, and he like punched his complex so that it just disappeared. It was gone. That's so effective. Forget the long, many years analytical procedure. If you can just punch it.
Yeah, he used a specific technique, which is the name of it. It's got several names in the superposition. One is Indra's fist, because it's supposed to be the god Indra, who is the basically the archaic Hindu deity. His correlate is with Zeus and not all of those sky gods and lightning gods. But it's also a phallus as well. The movement is a phallus and testes operating together. So the testes move first, and then the phallus fires. That's the form, the rupa that it takes. But you need nama and rupa to make nama rupa, name and form, and the manifestation of that. And there's something about the kinetics of it, which also activates deep structures within the brain. And once you're trained to visualize that as penetration, then it literally means fuck the complex or fuck the the illusion. And the power that comes up from that can be astonishing if it's done properly. So yeah, he punched his OCD to death.
Brilliant. That is just brilliant. That must be yeah, it must be just superpositioned with what you would otherwise call instinct in sort of like the broadest sense.
It's the visualization of it.
Mm.
Because when you roar the lion's roar, then there is no fear.
Mm.
And it's also simultaneously the shout of confirmation that you've achieved insight, and therefore have become the Buddha in that moment. And the shattering, the destruction of illusion, Maya, is broken, shattered. Whereas otherwise it simply reflects back to you all of your problems. Now you've heard that before. Yeah. So
Yes.
Maya is the negative anima that operates and projects, we could say, negative deep structure complexes out towards the ego, and then there is the fear and the backing off from it. But that is an illusion. The penetration, the male penetration of the female illusion. See how Jungian that is?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not an ego that penetrates. It's something far deeper that is the empowerment by the supposed deity, which is not real, but it is, because you embody it and bring it into the world. Therefore, this integration that the Jungians go on about and never achieve, because it's just an idea. In one single physical integrated movement, there is also mind involved, a sitter. The mind is present in the body, and the deity enters in, therefore is integrated and is made manifest. Then internally, by external action superpositioned, the OCD complex was shattered. So as you say, that's superpositioning. There is so much in that which just goes beyond what the Jungians are capable of doing. It's the same with CBT. It's just loop cognition. This is not action.
Oh, agreed. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and the Chinese name for that particular, that they acknowledge it as Indra's fist, the translation also means to weave a thread, which means sutra. A sutra in Buddhism is basically a written text, but this is not written in language. It is written in form. And imagine how transcendent that is, to write in form and not in words. It's also called the cutting severance. If we take a Tibetan linguistic perspective on it, So the idea of cutting severance, of penetration to the truth, of weaving the thread of Tantra, the sutra, in physical form, name and form, cognition and body, superposition together. There's so much in that. There's layer upon layer upon layer. And representing it as I'm doing now, which is cognitive because it's through words rather than through action, is one level of understanding of it. But the doing of it does transcend that, because we feel it. It does have to be handled properly, it does, because other things come up when you go through the other seed forms, seed fists, as they're called. If you don't have the deity in place, you can't contain what comes up. There's a rage state which emerges, and that's Panksepian, but this is way before I'd even heard of Panksep. Rage manifests itself. It comes through, and it's an archaic, primordial assertion of instinctive rage, the masculine spirit of rage. And you need to be able to contain it in the Namarupa, in the name and the form, and in the expression of motion. It's powerful.
Yeah, it feels very important to not so much give a different perspective, because you have mentioned themes from this before, but it does feel very real. It does feel very, very real.
The feminine principles in there as well, in the form of the totem animal of the crane, and then you have the ape, and then they call it Yab Yum, which is like yin yang. That's Tibetan Yab Yum, and the transcendent functions in there, but it's not like this sort of cognitive transcendence you get with Hegel. That this is like alchemy is supposed to be, and when they combine together, then you roar the lion's roar.
So in terms of training with this kind of thing, is the Roar the Lion's Roar like a big moment that everyone's sort of building towards, or is it like an ongoing thing?
It's an ongoing thing, because you build up that connection to it, and because it's an art form, and there are so many layers and levels to it, and but you can experience it quickly if you do the right things very early on, and then you're confronted with the potential that's within your own nature, and I mean extended nature. Like people talk about embodied consciousness or extended consciousness. It's your extended nature and your embodied nature fully. You'll realize, obviously, I'm sure from this, about how much this has influenced how I approach to depth psychology. The idea about making a vessel suitable to receive the anima is an exact analog for this, where you create a physical and mental vessel which is conjoined in order to receive the embodied deity, knowing that the deity is more like an Orthodox Christian icon through which the light shines, and it's not the actual glass, it's the light that you want. That's the representational form that something will take that allows you to move beyond it. And then there are the teaching deities, the yidams as they're called, and then the process of, first of all, observing them, then becoming them, which is super important. So you don't need the yidam. The yidam's your inner teacher, in a guru, basically, and they're usually lineage teachers. And because it's tantric and because it's elevated, you don't have to have known physically these teachers from the past, as in ever having spoken to them. But what we would understand as the field represents them. And the representational psychodynamic is that which you work with, which then brings what they attained and achieved into alignment with you. And this is all esoteric until there's action. And once there's action, and then there's feeling, and then you feel the transformation, and it's like, well, this is more real than anything I've ever experienced in my life. That's the difference. You don't get that with people who sit and contemplate.
No way. I think a really cool thing to go into, if it's a dedicated seminar, is on the dialectical syncretism aspect. Because you mentioned the vessel to receive the anima. Same thing too with deep structure complexes. That seems so built into Tantra.
It does.
Obviously built up via that cultural tradition over however many hundreds or thousands of years. There's I don't see a similar psychodynamic like that in the other schools at all.
No. So
No.
how can they access the ancestral psyche, even the cultural ancestral psyche, if they're not open to receiving it? That's why I say you must be able to receive before you can follow.
Mm.
So when you receive the root guru or the yidam, the internal teacher, then you follow by assimilation to the guru. So you exchange places on the inside. And then you go beyond that to bodhisattva, enlightened mind. A bodhisattva, I would say, is a glimpse of the meta instinctive field in Western terms. So it is important. There's so many. It's not a replacement in all directness for depth psychology, but the complementarity is real.
Mm. Mm.
You're right. There's no equivalent at all to that. Which is
No. I found deep structure complexes the hardest to understand. It was really new to me when you introduced it, obviously, but it explains so much immediately. So I was almost surprised it hadn't been picked up elsewhere, but I'm not surprised it would have arisen naturally through an organic cultural practice. I'm fascinated then how these things, not obviously literally Tantra necessarily, but these things would have evolved as a form of cultural memory all the way through the Paleolithic. The fact that a culture can refine it, it means that it's almost like we're supposed to be able to do it.
I totally agree with you. There's definitely what we could call a Sheldrakean effect at work there.
Mm.
So it should be relatively easy for people in the West, then, in theory, once they get the basic idea, to uncover what is latent within them. So it's not a superficial suggestion. It's an uncovering of what is now actually there and always was. So that would be to transpose one culture into another. They're making efforts these days, people, to do that, but the efforts are paltry, only have to do with fantasy movies and Tolkien and, dare I say it, Harry Potter and things like that. It's like, this is all bollocks. But the thing, a deep structure complex is not a problem if you know what they are, and more than that, if you actually consciously help to create them. If the generation is unconscious, in other words, it's through the suggestion, say, that there is a Jungian shadow or a negative anima or whatever else it might be in there, that will seep in and it will be autonomous and it will generate itself internally to reflect back to you. That's a problem. If, however, you say, okay, right, I'm being told that this is real, but not real. Therefore, I will generate that in order to get a reaction, but I know it isn't real. But I also have to engage with it so that I can move beyond it. That's a completely different perspective. The Jungians don't say the shadow isn't real. I tell you, it is real. It becomes everything. It's the same with the negative anima. So you can't get beyond it except to this nebulous idea of the self, which is, differentially described in all sorts of different ways by people, including that idiot Edward Edinger, which is a huge problem. And he has no way of embodying that process as a lived experience in life. It's all too abstract and fanciful.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, it's why, I mean, the way that you talk about Tantra, I find it interesting because my father was hugely into martial arts, and I was into them for most of my life, but I didn't see the point of them.
Yeah.
They were when I was like 5, they were exercise, and they probably were basically. I can barely remember the names of them, but it was as if they were taken out of a cultural context. You do your katas, you go up the belts, and then you're done, type of thing. So I didn't really get it. It was like stressful exercise. You have to, because the what they called, it's not a sifu, it's sensei.
Yeah.
Horrible people, awful people. The ones that I met, angry, vicious, as if there was some kind of significance that was supposed to be there, but not there. But hearing you talk about Tantra, it makes sense. It's as if these martial arts systems, or at least ones like Tantra, are supposed to be within something that's more psychological as an aspect to them. But I never experienced that. I don't know how common that is.
Well, I would say 99.9% recurring or devoid of any purpose beyond that which you've described. Oh, the hollow, there's no culture in them at all. I mean, karate is supposed to be Japanese karate anyway. It's supposed to be um, a Zen practice, which is Mahayana Buddhism, and it's not. They don't do it.
No.
They do what they call zazen, and it's nothing at all. It's not even mindfulness. It's in that direction, but they don't do enough of it. It's ritualized. It's empty, literally empty,
Mm.
without form. It's name only, nama without rupa. But this is supposed to be about that principally. It's supposed to be about the cultivation. I've mentioned cultivation before. You need form, then you need cultivation, and then you need to pressure test it. Those stages that I've mentioned, and without that, in anything pretty much you get nothing out the other end.
Mm.
You started with nothing. It's not a quantum vacuum nothing. It's a complete nothing.
Mm. Yeah, you was just. I think it was Wadaru Suhari was
Oh yeah,
the,
what yeah.
just remembered. Yeah, I remember you had to go. You're supposed to go ki each time you punch or you kick, and I didn't understand that at all. Why you're supposed to? It felt really awkward to do that. But I imagine that used to probably be something maybe in an earlier cultural practice that was supposed to be an embodied
Yeah,
affective state or something, but it's not that anymore. You just go
yeah,
oos 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 every
yeah.
time you sort of move. So it's a massive shame, but I suppose it's inevitable. You know.
Yes. Yeah. Well, when somebody in a rage state of consciously integrating rage, so it's not destructive, it's constructive, shatters their OCD complex in a single penetrating phallic punch that's outside and inside superposition, and then they make a noise when they do that, and it's real.
Mm. Yes, 100%. You wouldn't be able to stop the noise, I imagine. In that case, it would
Oh,
just whatever the ancestral elements involved are, they're coming out.
yeah.
They're coming out. Yeah, cool. I'm excited now, Steve, to talk about Tantra and to do a Tantra video.